Okay, so I've just started recording at 7 o'clock. If anybody missed any of the meeting last week, right, that's all posted. It's on a YouTube video. The links on Moodle, that'll just stay up. So if a few months from now you want to go back and pull that out and look at it, right, it'll still be there. I think as long as you're a Lynchburg College student, you can still have access to all your Moodle pages. At some point, when you're no longer a student, when you graduate and finish the program, then you'll lose your IT access and you won't be able to get to the Moodle pages. So if there's some of the stuff you want, any papers or any of that stuff, just go ahead and pull it off the Moodle pages and download it for your own reference, right? Just put it on your computer. You can keep it there. So all the PowerPoints, all that stuff's fair game. So I thought tonight, some people need to present their papers. I thought we'd walk through a couple of these handouts first. They're not the handouts, the PowerPoints and some of the things, just to kind of review some of this. So let's go to share. And where's the Moodle page? Actually, we don't even need to do that. We can go right to PowerPoints. All right, so here's the PowerPoints from the chapter on motivation. I just want to touch on a few of these. Then we'll get to organizational design. Part of leading and organizational change is to motivate people to actually make changes. And so kind of review here quickly some of the more common motivational theories. This one you may have heard of. This is expectancy theory. So this is a little bit like operant conditioning from the standpoint that I'm pointing at my screen, you can't see me. If you see the blue ball as effort, the idea is if we put out a certain effort, it will lead to a certain level of performance. So let's say, for instance, you wanted to get in shape by start running 5K races, right? So if you started training at fast walking and then jogging, you put the effort in, started training, you would lead to a certain level of performance where you could finish a 5K race, a run anyway, maybe not a race, but a run, and that would lead to a level of performance that you'd be able to finish a 5K run. Right, and the outcome of that would be whatever the outcome you desired. Maybe you want to try to win a medal because you're a fast runner, or more than likely, maybe you're trying to drop some pounds and improve your cardiovascular, right? And so the idea is that the person being motivated has to expect, it's based on their perception of that effort will lead to a level of performance, and the level of performance will lead to an outcome. And you see the word valence down here below outcome. The person must desire the outcome. They must be convinced that the outcome is something they want. So, I mean, I always tell the students, you can't train your cat with dog treats because they don't like them, right? It's the same kind of thing. You can't offer things to people that they don't value, right? Because often you'll see something like, I don't know, a 60-year-old in charge of a company or in charge of HR will offer something to Generation Xers, and they're just not interested. And so it doesn't motivate them, and nobody understands why. Right? And the fact is, they didn't see any value in that outcome. So the whole idea is the person being motivated has to see in their perception all these linkages are true. Right? So that's expectancy, and it's a pretty common one. It's kind of related to operant conditioning, like I said, but a lot of people get it wrong in that they don't make sure it's the person's perception, or they don't make sure the outcome has valence for that person being motivated. Needs theories, we're not going to go through Maslow's, most people are familiar with. Many people are not familiar with Herzberg motivational hygiene theory, so I just kind of walk through that because in this, there's another slide. This is the slide one. In this, it says there are hygiene factors and there are motivators. So motivators are things that motivate us externally, like we get recognition from our peers, we like the work we do, we get chance for advancement, we grow professionally, and that's kind of standard mill for motivating things. The hygiene factors are things that demotivate us, but the interesting thing is when we fix them, we aren't motivated, we're only not unmotivated. And I use a double negative there on purpose. So for instance, if somebody has a gripe with their supervisor, right, and that could demotivate them, but when you fix that problem with the supervisor, they're not necessarily motivated, they're just not unmotivated because of the problem with their supervisor. Same thing with working conditions, right? In my office, maybe it's hot and humid today, so I'm unmotivated, right? And if I fix the air conditioning, now it's comfortable in my office, that doesn't necessarily say that's going to make me motivated. All that says is I won't be unmotivated because it's hot and humid, right? I can assure you I've seen classrooms of undergraduate students sitting in a classroom that's perfectly air conditioned and being not motivated, right? So and I think the hygiene factor are interesting because sometimes at work, we think if we have something demotivating people, if we fix it, they'll be motivated. And that's not true at all. What it does is it brings them back to neutral, right? So this is a theory that explains that because I was at a company one time where we were really griping about small raises and they gave us a bigger raise. And remember the HR director said, oh, now they're all going to be motivated. I'm like, and I was thinking, no, we're not motivated. We're just not griping about being underpaid anymore. So I think I like this theory because it explains some things that not everybody gets. Like if you fix somebody's working conditions, if it's terrible and then you fix it, right, then it doesn't make them motivated. It just makes them not unmotivated. I think that's about all I wanted to get to in this chapter. The whole idea of equity, if people perceive unfairness at work without being explained, right, that tends to unmotivate people. Talk about operant conditioning a little bit. Oh, since we're on the topic, I like to talk about pay as a motivator sometimes. It turns out that if pay is a motivator, the association must be between performance and outcome. So if someone achieves a certain level of performance, they get extra pay for that. If they perceive that to be true, and there's somebody who's truly wants more money, then that acts as a motivator. And equity theorists tell that pay must be given in relation to input. So people that work harder should be given more pay, or people that get more outputs should be given more pay, for instance. That's kind of all I wanted to touch on tonight with motivational techniques. Anybody have any questions about that? All right, so let's jump to the next one, which is, yeah.
So back to pay as a motivator. This is
yeah, that always brings up conversations. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and pretty interesting when we have several, career salespeople in the audience. So we always get rewarded for the behavior of a client. So how do we know that that's being done correctly throughout a sales organization?
Okay, say that again. You get rewarded for what?
So we actually get rewarded, number one, for our efforts, but really it's the behavior of the client. Closing a sale is actually a reward on someone else's reaction, not our own behavior. So how would you work that in to restructure an organization that's used to having, maybe a higher compensation to a lower compensation, or a lower reward for, getting, clients to say yes? And how important is it? Is it really just not that important?
If pay is a motivator, if tied directly to your actions, right? So just because we pay somebody a lot of money, like, I don't know, when I lived in Detroit in the 80s, the UAW workers made a lot of money, right? And I assure you, there were many of those people that were unmotivated at work to the extreme, but they made far more than a lot of blue collar factory workers made. So in sales commissions, right, of course, like you said, it's tied to, well, I'm a little surprised that you said it's tied to someone else's behavior, which is exactly true. It's when someone else signs on the dotted line and spends money that the commission kicks in. So, but they're actually getting rewarded for making that happen. Whether they made it happen or not, they get credit for it, right? Like your stockbroker gets credit when your stocks go up, whether the stock market went up because, whether the whole stock market went up or just your stocks went up. So that's an interesting thought. I guess I'm not really sure how to address the answer. I kind of want to throw it out to the group. Does anybody have any other thoughts on how you might? So the real question is it equitable, right? How do you know it's equitable across the organization? Is that the?
How is it equitable across the organization? Is it more beneficial to reward people financially from hitting like a stage of a pipeline or a stage of a progress with a client versus the actual sale? The sale is easy, it's trackable, and then there's no risk for the organization because there's revenue.
Right. Do I give you partials? Is that kind of the thought? I'm not aware of anybody who does that. In the organization standpoint, they want sales, right? So putting people into the pipeline but not closing the deal isn't a sale to them. And so you need to be careful about what there's people game the system all the time, right? So what you put up as rewards for certain actions, those are the reactions you're going to get, right? I think that's why companies push for, no, we want you to actually close the deal before you get a reward out of this, as opposed to putting people into the pipeline.
So is it more like thinking through building an organization?
Uh-huh.
Are people motivated more by just simply the end result of the sale, or would they be motivated more by incrementally increasing the dollars and or decreasing the dollars if certain actions along the process weren't followed? Like say you have a 5-step sales process,
Okay.
it's rewarded the same whether you skip the 0.5 or whether you go through points 1 through 5. Would people be less motivated to then not really increase the compensation, but basically decrease compensation if they didn't do all 5 steps? Or would that make it more equitable since everyone knows you have to do everything that's asked of you to get the same dollar?
Hey, Brett, Robson here. I mean, I don't think people trust their sales process and have the KPIs to enforce, third meetings equals 65% close ratios. So we offer a level of compensation tied to that. And everybody, once they get successful, kind of buck the system, and then they fall back on, figuring out the system later. So I like your idea. That's how I got out of the Texas Department of Insurance, was to have 5 stages of a referral process too.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of stumped by this one. It's a pretty complex answer because, it's a pretty complex situation because you got to be careful about what behaviors you're going to motivate people to do, right? And so so when you talk about skipping the steps of the sales process, but you still get the sale, is that what you mean, Brett?
Yeah. So, like practical scenario, I have 5 producers who are highly motivated by money, but they bypass the system, therefore leading to a worse client experience and a worse account management experience because people aren't led through the process of what to expect.
Gotcha.
But yet they're highly rewarded. So the rest of the organization just sees, 5 yokels that get sales and move on and dump a whole, heap
Yes.
load of shit on them. But yet the rest of the organization is not rewarded in the same way.
Yeah. I guess my thought would be, since they only did part of the job, they only get part of the reward. Right.
Yeah, and that's where I was going back to if you're going to get X dollars, let's go ahead and only get X dollars if all 5 stages have been accomplished. Otherwise, you're getting a reduced compensation.
Right. Because it causes problems for the customer, and that means it causes problems for us. Right.
Correct.
And the person says, "Hey, man, I got the sale. That's the idea." No, that's not the idea. To set up the customer for a long-term pattern of success with us is the idea, not the sale today. Right. The sale today is only one of the things we're after here. Right. So, but from their point of view, right, what are they getting rewarded for?
Right? Simply the sale. Yeah, they're
only
rewarded
the sale
for that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You got to be very careful about how you're going to reward people because that's how they'll behave, right? So, in my opinion, there should be a penalty for not taking them all the way through the process. They've short-circuited the process, and it's undeniably causing problems. And if you don't fix it, it's reasonable to expect the others to do it. Right? And then you're going to have more and more problems. Then you're going to have a really tough time hanging on to your customers. Right?
Lee.
Yeah.
Every time I've been involved with reward systems that are like this, bonuses or direct compensation for actions like sales, it is extremely complicated because all you're doing in that situation is rewarding certain behavior, not getting the whole of the job done. And when you're in a situation where their compensation is by the hour or a salaried compensation and not the kind of reward system that you're talking about, there's an effort to understand everything about the job, how it affects the people upstream, how it affects the people downstream, how it affects what's going on with the customer. It's a whole rounded 360-degree experience. When you're working with a sales staff, and I don't really understand this the scenario that we were describing well enough to comment on this, but the ones in my experience, when you're working with a sales staff who are compensated on selling and not on the success of the project or the contentment of the customer,
Right.
then you completely ask the salesperson to omit that in their efforts, and that's what happens. And and the other thing is that
Takes you where you don't want to go. Right.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
misaligned incentives, just like the problems with the healthcare system.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, misaligned incentives.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, a good thing on that point to carry on what Terry was saying, that's like the whole Wells Fargo thing, right? That whole financial,
Oh, yeah. Clearly.
that sums it up. I read a book a couple of years ago called Drive. I think I've mentioned, or you hear about it a lot, by Daniel Pink. And I don't know what level of expert he was in compensation, but the whole book was how, give your employees lots of autonomy, lots of opportunity to gain mastery, and a really solid purpose. That's kind of like his thing, and then like let them go. And what Daniel Pink says is that the most successful organizations in the world that he's encountered pay a little bit better than average compensation, and then they take compensation off of the table and let those people just go crazy. So
yeah.
that's his thing. So that's all I got.
Yeah. I mean, LL Bean is famous for that, right? They pay above average for what they do, right? And they get really good help, and they take really good care of the company and the customers because of it, right? And I think you're right. I know we have, we were talking to the guy's head of development at Lynchburg College. He's in charge of getting money from the alumni and anybody else they can find, right? And I asked him one time, do you have a compensation plan, or do you have compensation like commissions for your people if they bring in rewards? And he said, absolutely not, because some people will go from person to person to person begging for money. In the short term, any money they get, the person might get a cut of. You think, well, that would be good. But if they didn't pester this person like this, if they developed a relationship with them and got a lot more buy-in from them, we could get much more money from them down the road. But instead, this person in their drive for a short-term commission will poison the well, and you won't get anything out of this person in the long run. Right? So they don't do it that way. So yeah, you got to be very careful about commissions, because they can wreck things. That's for sure. When I used to work for General Electric, we sold police radios and systems, right? You're not selling just walkie-talkies, but it's a tower, it's base stations, it's control panels, computers that run all this stuff. They might be a few $1 million to $50 million in a system. And the sometimes some of our salespersons, people were getting a lot of money when they got these systems award off the commissions, and we would find out they won the bid by $70,000 over our competitor, and it turns out accidentally somebody left a $100,000 server off the bid, off the list of materials you needed for this job. So it looked like we had the winning bid, and it looked like we were going to make a little money on it. But then when we went to implement it, we did not. And it turns out that somehow this piece of equipment got removed from the equipment list, and it was just enough for us to get the job, and the salesperson got the commission. And the fact that we lost money on the job did not interfere with the person's commission at all. Right. And so you really quickly got the idea they work for themselves and not the company.
It takes them off the team.
Yes. Yes, it does. Right. And other people kind of resent it too. You go back to the equity thing. Hey, I'm working as hard as he does, right? Why is he driving, a Lexus, and I'm driving around in my old Chevy, right? Yeah, I think so. So it does cause some issues, but to original question, yeah, I think if they're shortcutting the system and it's causing problems, then they should be penalized for that. I mean, and if they're getting paid, if they're getting rewarded through their pocketbook, then that's where they should feel it, right? You didn't do the complete job, you don't get complete commission, right? You left a mess for others to clean up. And if you don't do it, then you're going to end up, you're rewarding them for their bad behavior, and it's only rational to expect other people to copy at some point. Right. So yeah, it's tricky stuff. Even giving people small things like not missing work, not coming in late. I had a student who just did a paper on a casino she worked in during the summer. She's an HR major, and she did an honors thesis on it. And they destroyed the morale by giving dealers a bonus for being on time and no tardies, no absences for a certain number of weeks, and you got a bonus. And they destroyed their morale because quickly everybody came to expect it. And the people one level above them, the floor supervisor and all, wanted to know why they didn't get a bonus. And their first level of supervisory management was leaving the casino to go to someplace else because they were offended that they didn't get their bonus and they thought it was due them. Right? And the dealers, when they said, when they didn't get their bonus because they were late one day or whatever, they said, but I had an excuse. And then they were mad because they didn't get their bonus. So it really made a mess out of things as opposed to getting the results they wanted. So you got to be very careful when you offer money to people to do their certain behaviors, or particularly when it's different than everybody else's, I guess is the point. Okay, let's look at,
We were taught that money is just a dissatisfier. And if you've got enough and you're satisfied, stop. And you want to motivate people, give them attention and recognition or some other kinds of rewards,
yes.
but not money. And every single bonus system that I've ever seen, I keep running into people want to incentivize safety with money and other things in construction, like getting a job done on time and that sort of thing. It has been a dissatisfier instead of a motivator. I've never.
Yeah, because by definition it's uneven, right? So it violates the equity principle there, and it causes a mess.
Somebody's unhappy.
Yeah, and one group rushed and got their job done on time, and they got a reward for it. Another group, job wasn't as critical. They did good work, but because they didn't screw up and weren't late, they didn't get a bonus for getting in on time, and now they just get their normal pay, and now they're unhappy, right? Yeah, it causes a mess all around the board. All right, it's always an interesting topic. Here at the college, by the way, everybody gets the same raise every year. I mean, not every year, sorry. They decide how much raise we're getting, and then everybody gets the same thing, no matter your pay, no matter what. If it's 1.5%, everybody gets 1.5%. So there is no stacking. There's no 3s and 4s and 1s and 2s and none of that going on. Kind of not the same as corporate world, but it does make it easier, I guess. All right, so I have a group of slides on organizational design. I kind of want to walk through about some of the things. It talks about organizational change. Here's some ideas, some pressures for change. You can see this, forces for change. You can see this slide, okay? And you get an idea of the forces for change, like competition, global markets, and so forth. I just want to mention Lewin's process model. Basically, it's a lot simpler version. Well, this was first. This has been around a really long time.
We're just looking
we
at
can't see the
Moodle.
flyer.
What's that? Can you see the PowerPoint?
No,
No.
just Moodle.
Okay. Let's see why not. All right.
And we can't hear sometimes because there's a lot of noise.
Okay. Let's go back to new share. All right. Now you got it? Process
Yeah.
for plan, organizational change. Good. Okay. All right. So this is Lewin's process model, and it's a much simpler version than Kotter's. It was decades earlier. It basically just says, before you make a change, you have to unfreeze. So it's very similar to Kotter's burning platform. Step one is you got to convince people the need for change, kind of thing. Other than that, there's a lot of similarities between the two. Let me just kind of flip through a few of these slides here. Generally, the change agent, somebody's driving the change. If it's a healthcare thing, it might be you guys as an outside change agent, right? And kind of a buzzword you would hear a lot in the world of change is a transition management. How are we going to manage this transition, particularly if you're switching something major like from one healthcare system to another, right? So that's a useful term to talk to in things about we need the company to do this activity. How are we going to manage this change or the transition? Some of the things we talk about, I don't really want to get into re-engineering. So, another sort of a process like Kotter's for change, you have to convince people there's a need for change, selection of task redesign, so what is it going to do? Then a number of steps you got to do to diagnose what's going on. Basically, they just break down a little more than Kotter does. Step 4 talks about a cost-benefit analysis. I know a number of you guys are interested in doing that when you try to pitch change to a company and enforcing or trying to get to a no-go decision on how to handle this. I wanted to jump to not so much surveys. All right, resistance to change, right? This is what all you guys are going to run into. I imagine everybody's going to run into when it comes to changing benefits. Why is there resistance to change? So it's interesting that organizations like to invite change when it offers a competitive advantage. So if the organization thinks they can get ahead, right, often they're for change. But organizations will resist change when it threatens the organizational structure and control. So it's interesting. They like outside change, the first one. They don't like inside change, the second one, right? Why not? Because the people that are engaging in this change are often threatened by the change in the structure and change in the control system of the organization. So they're afraid they're going to be left out. They'll see a reduction in power. Their little empire will be messed with. Somebody's in their sandbox, whatever term you want to use. So organizations must remain stable with the need to react to external change. So we got to have some level of stability. We can't be changing all the time, although that's probably less and less true. And we got to be able to react to external changes. And resistance can warn of the need to re-examine the need for change. So if you get pushback from a change, right, it could be a couple of things. Maybe the change isn't necessary, or more than likely the perception that the change is not necessary is there, and you need to deal with that perception. Right, so we still go back to perception a lot and people deciding there's a need for change. But I thought the slide was interesting from the standpoint that outside change is viewed as something we can attack. Inside change is viewed as very dangerous, particularly by the management. Right, they're very worried about it. So sources of resistance to change. Organizational sources, so there's a narrow focus of the change. The change only affects one group. Group inertia, right, where everybody likes doing the same thing. It takes effort to change. You might threaten somebody's expertise. Somebody's always, they're known to be an expert in something, and if you switch to something else, now they've lost their power base in the organization. They lose their expertise and are not as valuable. Or they're threatening their power because it might be changing the hierarchy or the org chart of the organization, and just might send resources from one place to another. We might shift the resources around, right? So all those are organizational sources of resistance to change you might have to think about once you get in an organization trying to sort of push them in an area for change. So that's from an organizational standpoint. From an individual source of resistance to change, right? People get in habits, they're used to things, they get comfortable with the devil you know, and so forth. They feel like there's security with what they know, and there's always risk with things they don't know. There's economic factors. So this change might scare me. It might affect my economics factors, like my pay, my job security, those kind of things. Good old fear of the unknown, lack of awareness why we need to change, and other social factors like I might not be comfortable with these new things I have to do. Right, so all those resistance to change. I have to tell you though, when I was making, I think Tom told you I used to make cell phones for a living for Ericsson. We had a big consulting company come in probably in the mid '90s, late '90s. We had a big consulting come in, and the guy said, "Yeah." We said, "Where are you guys here?" "Well, your upper management has hired us to come in and see what we can do to improve the efficiencies, make the organization better, whatever that happens to be, whatever we can find." I said, "All right, great." So I said, "How long do you think you guys are going to take?" And said, "Well, we'll be here, whatever, 4 months." Like, you think you're going to have something for us in a month or two? And the guy looked at me and says, "Why?" I said, "Because we want to get better. So we don't want to wait 4 months. If it takes you 4 months to recommend something, take us 6 months to implement. And if it's that obvious, right, then we should be able to do it pretty quickly. So why don't you give us a report after a month?" Right? And then a week later when I saw him and I said, are you going to make that date? Are you going to have something for us in a month? And he said, "Okay, I got to ask you guys, every organization we come into gives us pushback. Please don't make us change. They wish we would go away. They want to drag their feet. They want change to happen as slow as we can." He says, "I have never been in an organization where you guys come up to us, stamp your feet, and say, 'Where's the change? We want it now. Where's the new info? We want it right away.'" Right? He says, "What's different about you guys and everybody else?" I said, "Oh, I have a clear answer for that, and the answer is this: we make cell phones for a living." Right? And here's what we know: we make our cell phones, and I was in a factory where we make cell phones. And every time we launch a new cell phone into production, there's a chance of it being a disaster. We won't be able to produce it for whatever reason. There's software glitches. IT drops the ball. We just can't get it together. We have a vendor. A vendor is a problem, and they can't deliver. And for some reason, we can't make the cell phone and make our needs. So every new product is a chance to be a disaster. But so it's a risk. Every time we switch from a known phone that's run good in production to a new phone, it's a risk. There could be something hidden there that blows up, and it hurts us and hurts us badly. On the other hand, we make cell phones for a living. This is during the '90s, right? What happens if we keep making the cell phone for 2 years? For sure, it'll stop being sold because the market will pass us by, and we're in big, big trouble. So in the world of risk, right, new phones had a certain level of risk, but keeping the old phone around for a long, long time, the risk was 100% going to fail at some point, right? So the idea was new phones were risky, but staying with the existing phones were 100% chance to fail. Just give it enough time, nobody's going to buy that phone, right? So I think some of you guys in the benefits market might be able to look at that as a possible, talking point, in that yeah, changing to new health benefits is risky, but keeping the ones you got going up X amount year after year after year, eventually that becomes a hurdle you can't jump anymore. And so the risk, even though the risk of changing is real, the risk of not changing is also real. Don't feel comfortable like you can stay where you are, because the platform's on fire and things are going to get worse. I don't know, that's just a thought I had. I'm just kind of thinking about these slides and how they apply to most of your guys' businesses. I think that's kind of the closest I can come to for reasons for pushing for change. I'm sure that's occurred to most of you, but it's a real factor out there, and I think it's one of the levers you can move to get people from point A to point B. I don't know, has anybody tried that and been unsuccessful because you can't get them to see it, or do you have the numbers to do that, like the financial data to make a case like that?
I have the financial data, and I've made that case. And actually today I had to fight that battle again with my HR director. Even though I've shown everybody in my group, and we're all internal in the same company, I've shown them all that the numbers don't work going forward, and for either the company or the employee, and still we're in the middle of trying to make this change, and we're trying to make the change effective January 1. Our cutover date for open enrollment is November 1, and today's October 1, and I'm still having to fight the battle with the HR director because she's worried that everything's going to fall apart, and it's really hard. You just have to keep it up. It just isn't, and it seems to me like you have to be able to show that it's a way better move to make the choice to change, but you also have to find a way for the people who are in the company to think that it's not going to be so hard. It appears extremely difficult. From my perspective right now, and from our HR directive's perspective right now, it looks almost insurmountable. The people who are used to buying this product have to change everything they think about how it works, and we have to get all of the people in the company to buy and choose health insurance completely differently. So if somebody can figure out how to show why it's worth it, which I think there's really good evidence for that, and I can understand it completely, but also make it relatively easy to implement. I mean, fully insured is easy, really easy. Just pay for it.
Yeah.
Basically, you have no control. You have nothing to do except find out at once a year whether people are going to buy it or what level they're going to buy. That's really it. But HR departments view just that process as horrendous and disruptive. So now we don't only have to find out who's going to buy the insurance, but we have to teach everybody involved how to buy it completely differently. It's a huge amount of change management.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, for me, it was very difficult, like even showing the financial impact of what it looks like if your rates just don't increase for 5 to 10 years versus just increase, not even talking about reductions. And it always seemed like that was like everyone understood it, but no one really was concerned about 5 years out or 10 years out. And everyone was in that year to 2 years. And so I was able to get people to move forward when I started using like the individual stories of when we did those big hard changes, like when we moved to a plan that, pays for the employee's healthcare for them, even if it's the deductible and does the zero financing like Apostrophe does. And going back through how it impacted the members that had been delaying medical care because they just were, afraid of the unknown themselves. So we kind of, brought to light that social deterrent that people weren't aware of what, a $3,000 and a $5,000 deductible with United Healthcare and a system they didn't know, what the consequences of getting an MRI was actually going to lead to, or if they could even bother. And so we made it personal about, the mechanic that can't feel his hands and hasn't for 5 months. That impact of change, people were way more willing to adopt to versus just looking at the numbers and all the fears. When we made it personal about the impact of today, that's where it started to change people.
Can I share my screen and show you guys something that I did that I found I thought was cool? You cannot start screen share. Is there a way to do that?
I don't know.
I want to share something. You might have to free me to share it.
Yeah, let me allow record.
I have a share button at the bottom of my screen. Do you?
Yeah, I do, but it says you cannot start screen share while the other participants. So you have to stop
Oh, let me
sharing.
stop my share. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Okay.
All right. I'm not saying this is going to be great, but I'm going to try. So I this and I actually I'm going to probably have my little marketing company that I'm doing a little work with take this and make it look better and sexier because I think it's so powerful. But I think in Dave Chase's book, or one, actually not in Dave Chase's book, The CEO's Guide, in one of the articles that he wrote like years ago, I remember Dave Chase saying that the company in the United States that should be most pissed off about healthcare is Fidelity Investments because billions and billions of dollars have gone to healthcare that could have gone to 401k plans or retirement plans. And I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. So I've always had like this strong desire to like build out a model where I say to this employer or employers that I work with or prospects that, look, why don't we just do something really transparent and say every dollar we save in healthcare, we'll just put to your profit sharing your 401k plan. Like we'll net what we pay as a company. And then if we save, or we'll come up with a cool formula. So a year ago, and I share this only because I don't know if this was one of the things that helped in the sales process, but a year ago I presented to a company with, I guess on this, you can see my screen, they had 287 employees. Right now they have 350 on their plan. They just named me the advisor of the plan like 2 weeks ago. And so a year ago they were like, oh, what you're talking about, Andy, is a little too aggressive. But anyways, this was one of the things I showed them, and it looked a little better than this. But this particular company, we estimated in the first year they were going to save $958,000 in healthcare costs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that worked out to like, on average to an employee, annual employer savings was right. Yeah. So if you take that number of employees and divide it by 287, it's like $3,000 an employee, give or take. And we thought, well, let's give some of that money back to the employees. And let's say some of the money will go to the bottom line of the company. We'll just do a 50-50 split. And what I did is I said, all right, let's take this company and break it down into its actual population of people. And I said, all right, how many people are between ages 20, in the 25 age, the 30 age? I think I just broke it in 10-year increments, 40 year, 50, 60. And then I said, all right, there were 42 youngins, some this many 30-year-olds, 27. And I said, all right, if we just put that much money into an account for that, a savings account for that person, and we inflated that money over a period of like their working years. Remember, this is just 1 year. I can't remember on this particular one, allocation or retirement account second year. I think we decided we'd throw in an extra $500 because we were going to be doing such a great job for them. The cool part is when you do all the math, and I was taking pretty conservative, like maybe somebody would say 9% was a little high for somebody in their 20s, but over their lifetime maybe, and then I kind of brought it down. I did all the calculations. I think, way at the bottom was the best. Maybe at the very bottom was, So the opportunity cost was $5,687,000 from a 1 year. That was just the pure 1 year allocation to their savings account. So I think as people are trying to make like strong arguments, you say, if 1 year we took this much money that we saved and split it 50-50 with employees, flipped it into an account, and then that grew over their working, history, it's a lot of money. Imagine what this is compounded over multiple years of savings, that's not going towards healthcare. So I thought this was a strong argument that when I made it, they were like, wow, that's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
That's the power of compounding and everything like that.
Oh, so, yeah, sure.
Kind of cool. Back at you.
Okay. So I think it's a mixture of both, right? You got to make the financial argument and you got to make the personal argument, right? I think talking about not only if we keep going down the path we're going, not only do you not get to save the whatever, I noticed the 25-year-olds made $62,000 over their career with the 1600, right? But everybody's job's in jeopardy. I think I don't know if that's the right path to take, but probably right. People view safety issues first before they build moving ahead, right? First, they don't want to lose ground, then they view moving ahead. So I think both are important, but I think that's part of it. When you not threaten people's jobs, but describe a threat to people's jobs, I think should get some attention, but it doesn't always. All right. So that's some of the things, resistance to change. So again, threatening expertise is one of the ones you'll see in management, right? So there might be somebody in HR who understands the current system fairly well, although that would be rare, right? And they would be threatened by moving to a new system because then they're on a level playing ground with everybody again. Certainly, of these keys to making changes, if you can get top management support, that's key, and make it sort of non-equivocal. Yes, it has been decided. This is how we're going. Get as much communication you can over and over and over again. Like Terry's talking about, we have to keep convincing these people, right? They're kind of panicking now. And one of the things you have to do is keep convincing them why this is different. Yeah, I know it's scary, but not doing it is worse, right? Not doing it is terrifying because these are the numbers, right? Trust me on this one, right? We're going to have serious problems if we don't make this change. Right. And then usually in organizational change, we try to find reward for those, some type of reward for those who are doing well. Right, like Andrew suggested, giving them some of the savings, right? Share the savings with them. So they're put through stress too, right? And it's a big deal. And yeah, their job is secure, but they didn't really see that as a threat like upper management might. So giving them some financial incentive might help also. Kind of did
just real quick on like Terry's situation. Like, wouldn't it be, say, sometimes better to find somebody that may relate to that person better? So going down the organizational change and say almost like you're wanting to get voted in as president, you just get more votes to then encourage that person to see the difference and the change along with it, because there's no way to see the product in a lot of these things that we offer. So it's hard for people to visualize. So like when you go to get married and you go around and test wedding cakes, you actually get to, see it, touch it, and all those things. So I think that it's a lot harder when you have something that, you can't touch and try out before you, say, introduce it.
Yeah. So what's the answer for that? Do you get testimonials? Do you get references from clients who are glad they did it? Is that the solution, you think?
Social proof.
I think it's also proof for small scale projects that you can do for them that aren't highly complex.
Yeah, if there's a way to do that, can you do that with benefits? Can you take part of their benefits and do this and not the whole enchilada?
Yeah. I think the big thing, like with the health data, Robson would agree to this, would be like the pharmacy benefit component. So like if a client, it's just, I think it's pretty low. Like if they're self-funded already and you have the flexibility to pull out whoever their pharmacy company is and stick in another one. I mean, in general, I think if they're in bad shape and you move them to something that would be considered good shape, there's potentially like a reduction in cost on pharmacy at maybe up to 1/3. So that could be a quick, easy hit,
Mm-hmm.
So that would be something you could do. And I think that's a strategy. Some of the advisors who are more into big, complex companies will go in and say, hey, give me an opportunity to show you an illustration of what you could be achieving on the pharmacy. And maybe that's a way to just get your foot in the door.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. And we have right down here, number 3, start small, right? So if you can get something going, establish credibility, all of that, there's a lot that backs that up. If you can, deliver and deliver it, and, keep your promises, I think that would move things a lot in your favor. Okay, I think that was about it. Yeah, that's about what I wanted to cover out of there. Let's go back to kind of one more thing I wanted to go through was the classic Dale Carnegie, right? We're talking about influencing people in this class, right? So the classic Dale Carnegie. So if you haven't read this book, right, it's an easy read. It's kind of what I call an airplane book. I didn't have them back then. It's about a stick with a pencil and all that. But I put together the key points all in one page here just so you review. Sometimes when you're trying to make stuff happen, sometimes when I'm at the university, I'm trying to get some change going. I mean, it's, people really don't like to change in a university. So these are just some good ways to get people moved over to your side of thinking. I like the middle one probably the best, about 12 ways to win people over to your way of thinking, right? So these are all classic from the 30s, but avoid the arguments, show respect to the other person's opinion, never tell somebody they're wrong. If you're wrong, admit it quickly, be friendly, get the other person saying yes, yes, so that you agree with them about the small things before you try to agree on the big things. Try to get the other person to do a good deal of talking. That's always good advice for salespeople. You're not there to sell people, right? You sell things out. You're there to try to solve problems. I'm here to help, right? I know that's always the salespeople I like best when I was in engineering was they're there to help. They're not there to sell you stuff. Let the other person feel the idea was his if you can. Try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. You got to respect how they see things. Be sympathetic to the other person's ideas and desires. Appeal to their noble motives, right? We want to help our employees. We want to help the owners of the company. We're trying to do better for all groups here. Dramatize your ideas, and it might be the idea of showing the gloom and doom of the future if we stay on the path we're on, right? And throw down the challenge. Like Terry said, this is going to be a very difficult change to do, but it's important to the survival of the organization. It's important to everybody's jobs, right? We need to do this. This is key. This is clutch, right? We absolutely got to pull this off. I think Kelly had a good point last week when she said she's trying to get her company to see benefits as a strategy, as a key piece of infrastructure that need to be successful. It's not an afterthought. It's not something Mark or HR should just farm out. It's a major expense for the business. It needs to be a key component of our strategy, basically how we're going to do this. And we should put a lot of thought and effort into it and try to come to something that's going to work for the company in the long run. That's why it's strategic. It's strategic to HR and it's strategic to the success of the organization. I kind of like that point of view. A lot of companies spend so much money on it, they don't know what they're getting. They would never spend that money on any other asset without knowing what they were going to get for it. So it's amazing how we're here today, in the position we're in. Anybody read this book? Is this still something that hits bookshelves? I know you can still see it at the bookstore. Yeah.
They used to make all of us take that course.
Yeah.
They still do or not, but decades ago, that was.
It was
you had to.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome. I was at I'm a member of like a little Toastmasters club.
Yeah, that's the other one I was thinking of was Toastmasters, right, Andrew? Yeah.
I was at it the other day, and it was funny because you had posted this, and I kind of read it. I printed it. I literally, I printed it and I put it right on my desk.
Oh,
you can see
yeah?
it.
There you go. So you get brownie points for the night. Yeah.
Yeah, I did, because you know what? I think it's really good stuff. And anyways, I was at the Toastmasters class, and this guy who gets up, who I really like, because he's just always kind of chill, and I think he has like probably some self-confidence issues, and he always is kind of like, oh, I wish I could be like more this and that. And there was something that happened the other day where he was supposed to do something, and he was doing it, but somebody skipped over him. And then I kind of watched the whole way he handled himself, and I was like, oh my God, that's exactly like it was.
Dale Carnegie.
Yeah, one of these things in here, and I got up to speak, and I was like, man, you just like embodied like exactly how to be a good person and like not get aggravated at something or get upset. So I really do think these, and everybody loves the guy. So I was like seeing like what he did and why he did it, and kind of congratulating him for it. So I think these things are awesome. They're really great. My wife, who is really good at communicating with people, she's like just like amazing. People love her, and I'm always like, why do people like you so much? And she goes, well, because my whole life is about acting like I'm Barbara Walters. I just ask people questions and I let them talk, and I'm like, oh my God. And she's right. If you just shut your mouth, which I'm not doing right now, but if you do it in life, it works really well.
I think the whole idea of
that's salespeople do listeners, right? I ask some questions and be quiet,
let talk. I like the idea of calling or directing attention to the other person's weaknesses or mistakes indirectly. Right, let them save face, let them get out of it, all of that. Everybody finds themselves, in problems like this, but I'm here to help come to a better solution and all that. So, anybody think of another business book from pre-World War II that still gets read, still sold in the bookstores? Anybody got the test of time like this one?
The one I haven't read, and it's literally been on my desk. You're asking the bookworm here.
Yeah. And
I haven't read it, and I've heard about it, and I need to read it. Is because I think it's supposed to be good, is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Have you heard of that book?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is a good one.
Supposed to be a good one, but I think that dates back a little bit.
Yeah. Viktor Frankl was a Vienna, Austrian Vienna Jewish psychologist who was thrown in a concentration camp during World War II. I haven't read the book, but it gets mentioned in our textbooks a lot. And then he was in the worst environment in the world, and rather than succumb to the pressure of this, he viewed himself on the outside as an observer, saying, when I get out of this after the war, I'm going to lecture about this. I'm going to write a book on it. I'm going to lecture on it. And what would I tell my students? I'm going to observe how it works with the guards and the inmates. And he did it as a big observation. So like, I'm not really part of this. I'm in the outside looking in. And he took himself out of the moment, took himself out of the emotional pressure of it, all that, so he could step back, way back, and see a big picture, and that allowed him to disengage emotionally from what was going on and dispassionately, and then figure out a way to solve his problems and get through the whole thing. And that's what he gets credit for, is figuring out how to come through one of the most horrific things imaginable and come out of it almost a stronger person. So he gets a lot of credit for that. But I haven't read the book, but it's certainly a classic.
Lee, if you take this book, the How to Win Friends and Influence People, and In Search of Excellence, and 7 Habits, you have everything you need to know to be a really excellent manager and succeed at least 80% of the time.
Yeah, I've used all of those in the classroom, right? The other one I would put with that from a production standpoint, because I'm an operations guy, is a book called The Goal, right? And it's written by a guy named Goldratt, Goldratt. And he is a Israeli physicist, so of course he wrote a book about manufacturing. But he's another guy who looks at it from the outside in, and basically, what's the goal? The goal is to make more stuff that we can sell so we can make more money. And this is not a textbook. This is not an idea book. This is a Socratic novel. It's a fictional story about this guy who runs a factory making compressors, like air conditioning compressors, and that's all they make, right? And the whole idea is we need to turn out more compressors with the same amount of resources so we can be more profitable. And he has to fight through the company hierarchy, the company, they're incorrectly measuring things, like what's this machine utilization? It's like, who cares what the machine utilization is? What we care is how many compressors we turn out in a shift, right? And if the machine sits idle for part of that time because it's more effective to use something else, then that's what we should do. So he has to fight his way through all these normal company problems to figure out what's the goal. The goal is to make more with less, right? And making more and putting them in the warehouse doesn't count. They actually have to be sold units we're shipping to customers. So we have to keep moving that direction. And when I was making cell phones, that's out on my desk. I gave a copy to all my engineers and all that. That's my favorite operations book. It's been around for quite a while, but it's an easy read because it's a fictional novel. It's not a textbook. First do this, first do that kind of stuff, right? And they talk a lot in there about how accounting doesn't necessarily measure the numbers correctly, and depreciations are kind of fake, and he kind of being a physicist, he could take a fresh look at all these kind of things. So it's called The Goal, and it's written by Goldratt, 2 T's. Okay. I do have a couple slides on leadership. They're up there for tonight. I don't really want to get into that, except for, I guess I do want to show one. Let me stop share, open this up again. Okay. It's going to share again. All right, you see the leadership line? Are we up?
No.
What's that? Yeah.
No.
No.
Oh. All right, I got one no and one yes. All right. So in terms of leadership, a lot of students ask me, how do you get people to listen to you, right? And I just want to skip ahead a little bit. So
we don't see it, Lee.
Okay.
We're still seeing Moodle.
Okay. Let me go back to it. Let me hit share again. All right, now types of power. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so So to be a leader, a lot of definitions of leadership have to do with exerting influence over others, right? And since leaders are the ones who often drive organizational change, I thought it was appropriate for this class. And so what students ask all the time is, okay, how can I get people to listen to me, right? I try to lead, no one will listen to me. Like, yeah, I get that. You're all undergrads. It's hard to get people to listen to. So in the leadership theories, we talk about how you exert influence is you need power, right? So how do I get power as a leader? Well, some of the things you do is coercive, right? Power based on fear. Do this, you're going to get in trouble. Do this, you're going to get fired. And there's lots of times in our lives where we have to respond to coercive power, right? You might be a principal in high school or whatever, have coercive power because they're allowed to punish people. Reward power, right? Some more of this work to positive versus negative. So positive standpoint, you have the ability to distribute something others value. They must value it, even including if it doesn't have to be money. It could be things like acclaim. You could give them an award. You could give them recognition from their peers, right? All those kind of things are reward. And often it's been my opinion, people have more reward power than they think, just from the standpoint of compliments and public acclaim and those type things. So people often underestimate their ability to make somebody's day by bragging about them in front of their boss or sending them an attaboy email or something like that. Legitimate power is based on one's positions in a hierarchy. So I'm giving out grades as a professor, right? So I have some level of power over the students, particularly the undergrads. They're used to being in that position and having teachers have power over them because of the position. Expert power, right? A lot of people have power. People will give them power. They give them the ability to influence them because they acknowledge your expertise. So if, I don't know, if one of you worked in IT, for instance, I was having an IT problem, I would let you influence me on all things IT because I would realize you have power over there. I imagine some of you run into this in the business world from your expertise, your different areas, whether it's finance or health benefit or whatever, that others will let you influence them based on your level of expertise in an area, right? And to do that, you need to establish your expertise. However you can do that. A lot of people will talk about, they'll demonstrate things like how long they've worked in the field. I've worked this and this. I worked with these kind of big companies or these famous people or whatever it is to establish your expertise in the field. My degrees, right? My degree's on the wall at the college, right? Why? Because it establishes my expert power, right, in the areas where I teach. Right? My legitimate power comes from me being the professor. My expert power comes from my degrees and my experience and so forth. Right? Can you have more than one type of power? You bet. Right? The more the merrier. The more types of power you have, right, the stronger leader you're going to be. Right? Many people we know in the industry might have legitimate power from the person in the organization, and they're known as an expert in their area. So they would carry far more power than, say, a manager who we didn't really respect what they knew or their experience and so forth. Right. And the last one is referent power. That's more like charisma, power based on identification with a person who has desirable resources or personal traits. I want to be like that person. I like the cut of their jib. I like the way she handles herself in meetings or when she's challenged or whatever. Right. Again, that's a different kind of power that anybody in an organization can have, or even not in an organization. If you're just dealing with an organization, they might like the way you dress, act, behave, talk, treat people, all of that. Right. And that falls in the category of referent power. So as you're looking at ways to get influence and be seen as a leader, even though you might not be part of the organization, right? These are all areas that have potential for you to mine to get power. And again, the more of these you can get, the better. In terms of legitimate power, I always found it useful as a project manager to get the highest person I could to come to the project kickoff meeting and say, hey, this project's really important to the whole organization. He's the project manager, or I handpicked him myself. He's the guy, and you guys are my favorite team. And I want you to, you got to do everything you can because your project is vital to the organization. So it lends some legitimate, you use some of the leaders' legitimate power to add to your power because they're telling everybody why it's such an important thing to do, right? I think those are all good techniques to try to gather in power around yourself so you can exert influence over others, right? It doesn't mean you can tell them exactly what to do, but you can at least get them to listen to you and listen to the suggestion and consider you, right, as someone they might let influence them. And I think that's probably the one part of leadership. People kind of get it, but they don't really think of it in these terms until it's spelled out for them. I think that's a useful way to look at it. Next one is building a power base. The next slide, it's a little more obvious to you guys, not so obvious to the undergrads, right? Yeah, you certainly have to respect others. It takes time to build power relations. They have to know you. They have to know your expert power. They have to come to trust you. They have to understand that you're an expert. They have to test your expertise a little bit. As you develop associations over time, right, you can do that. Having access and some control over important information is often a good way to do it. People will come to you for important information, and it sort of leverages your expertise. And sometimes, and you have to build power in stages. It just takes a while. You guys talked about repeated sales calls on companies and so forth. It takes time to establish, right, a history of good performance so you can move up in the power structure in an organization. I've seen some consultants have a lot of power in leadership and organization just because they've been there a while, they've done these things. They're respected, they're trusted, their expertise is appreciated. They have the top level management adding to their legitimacy, right? And they can end up with a lot of power in an organization. Any questions, comments about leadership power?
I just had one comment on it. I think in today's world, there's so many ways to manipulate, like for instance, like expert power, within 15, 20 minutes, you could build expert power online, and kind of fake it till you make it in a way on that. And then, management, say companies are afraid of employees quitting anymore. So they kind of can't have the same power as they used to. So I think a lot of the power, the old traditional power types of power are so different today.
Yeah, in terms of coercion, there's it's not that much, right? I would agree.
I thought I read Simon Sinek's book, Why Leaders Eat Last, not too long ago. That was pretty good. I thought this kind of gives you a perspective on leadership and why people follow you, or what do you need to do and who you have to be, and how things will just naturally occur if you do the right things.
I think so. I really liked his video where he talked about most leaders don't know the game they're in, something like that. And in it, he talks about, you have, like me, an MBA is from a company. If you're at a big company and you get moved to a different job, you're expected to show improvement very short order. So it's all about short-term gains, moving the ball forward, short-term gains, no matter what you have to do. And some people cause a lot of damage while they do that, as opposed to other companies where their goal is to keep the company profitable over the long run, so the company has a long-term survival. And when I teach, I taught some in Europe, where I see that as the family-owned, what I consider medium-sized companies in Europe. A couple hundred people work there maybe, and some of those companies have been around, they're the fourth, fifth generation, and their goal is not to increase ROI this quarter and next quarter, no matter what kind of customers they have to tick off. Their goal is to keep the company sustainable over the long haul, so their grandkids can have a place to work. Right? And that gives you a very different style of management. It doesn't mean you're sloppy. It doesn't mean you're not paying attention to the numbers. I think they're paying very close attention to the numbers, but just in a different way. They're all about customer satisfaction. They protect their reputation, very much so. And if they got to go the extra mile for somebody to clean up a mess, they certainly will. And I think it's very different than what corporate America does, where they think they have to answer to the shareholders every quarter, no matter what. And if that means dumping on the customers, then that's what they do. I think that's the road to get yourself in trouble. So I really like that video of his. And I think that kind of lends to what some of you guys are talking about. You're trying to show the long game, right? The long-term path to success, and it is a different one. And if we keep on the path we're on, we're going to have serious problems, if not really, really serious problems in the future. But he certainly has some good thoughts on some of these things. All right. That's pretty much what I wanted to cover out of the readings and all of that. Now I want to jump to the articles, right? Some of you have presentations to do yet on the articles, and I don't have a list of who presented last time, but I guess what you do is if somebody's ready to talk about their article, this is their organizational change article. I read everybody's paper, everybody has grades posted and for that. I'll just go around what time we have. It's 8 o'clock now. For those of you who are ready to present tonight, if you could just give a quick couple minute summation of the major thoughts of your paper, I think that'd be enough. Right? We kind of get
I can jump in first if you want to get it out of the way. So I think, I was on an airplane when I was reading the directions and I screwed up a little bit. So rather than just talking about straight up change within an organization, I kind of read it more as just an organization that was making more change in the marketplace. So I was definitely a little off target. But that being said, I went all in and found some articles about Amazon and kind of their idea of disrupting the pharmacy industry. And there were a whole bunch of articles on how Amazon's attack on the pharmacy industry has begun. that was coming. I was coming actually back from the Health Rosetta Summit, and Marty Macri, who just wrote like a pretty well-known or now well-received book on, I guess, the price we pay, had kind of talked. So that's kind of was on my mind. And what was interesting about what Marty Macri said, and I mentioned this in my little paper, he said, like, as they're really digging into it, they were thinking he was kind of, and he has a whole cohort of like really smart kids who are working with him at Johns Hopkins, who are crunching numbers and looking at data and everything. And he said that almost 50% of our taxes go to healthcare. And when you start to think about like Medicare and all the different programs, he was saying that about 5 to 10% of an employee's income, in addition to that, goes to healthcare. Just kind of not as a tax, but as a contribution out of their pay.
Mm-hmm.
And he made it really interesting. He really made the most interesting, and this doesn't apply to the whole country, but it was pretty just big numbers. He was saying that a family that has a pretty good, maybe dual income of like 250,000, which would be probably a little more white collar, $60,000 of their taxes go to healthcare, right? Just the government. It's just an amazing number.
Yeah.
So Dave Chase is pretty another thing he said, which just kind of always stuck with me, is that a lot of organizations have made a ton of money on the inflation of healthcare, right? As in healthcare, everybody has their hand in the cookie jar. So I kind of took it and thought, well, Amazon, who has made a fortune on like the deflation of industries, like think about bookstores, right? There used to be Barnes and Nobles and Borders and all these bookstores everywhere, and now they're all gone completely. Now some people might not like that, but in general, they've made a fortune like by tightening the margins and disrupting an industry. So kind of what I talked about in my paper or my article that I wrote was how there's probably just such a significant opportunity for an organization like Amazon to make a big impact in the pharmacy, in the PBM pharmacy space, right? If they decide that they want to just work on razor thin margins, at least initially, to disrupt, all these PBMs who are publicly traded companies who are wildly profitable, could really be significantly challenged by Amazon. And it's not only on the spread pricing, what the cost of the drug from the manufacturer to the pharmacy and the money they make on rebates, but I think the opportunity to they bought a company called PillPack, which is a company that I think they paid close to $1 billion for this company. So if I take 9 prescriptions, right, all those things get all kind of put together in one little package and mailed to my home. So every day I just wake up and I either take, one package in the morning or 1 in the morning and 1 at night, and they lay it all out for you. There are, I think, 2 out of 3 Americans take a prescription drug every day. So, and then older ones, especially when you get to the Medicare population, they could be taking 4, 5, or 6 drugs. And one of the big problems, obviously, is managing all those pills. So I think the combination of them making investments in in that company like PillPack, I think their ability to disrupt industries could put tons of pressure on the PBM. They have a same-day delivery model that they're building. There was a lot of talk about how that could be pretty amazing and could disrupt a lot of the existing pharmacy benefit manager mail order programs. Amazon obviously is an investor in Haven, which is that new disruptive entity that hopefully Berkshire Hathaway, JP Morgan, and Amazon themselves are going to see as an organization that can take care of their actual employees. Right? They asked this guy from Boston, who's a surgeon named Atul Gawande, to lead this organization, and ultimately between Berkshire and Amazon and JP Morgan, there's 1.2 million employees. So I could see them, and they're attacking on the pharmacy side and being the pharmacy benefit manager for that population, and then leveraging that further and further. So they're getting into Amazon. I mean, Alexa can ask you questions on your health. Now that model's going to grow. So I guess in general, I see them being very disruptive in healthcare. I could see them being very disruptive in the pharmacy benefit manager space. So I just thought there was a lot of opportunity. So how they're disrupting in their own organization, I don't exactly know, and I'm sure they are. But in the more general space, I thought it was pretty disruptive of the industry. So that was kind of my 411.
Yeah. So what's the timing on all this? Is it all coming out now?
Yeah, I think it's really going on now. Haven, I guess there's all different components. Like PillPack they own, and I think they're trying to. A guy. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, and this guy got up on the stage. He's kind of an advisor, and he was talking about how he had the whole master plan laid out for like what Amazon's going to do. Like Amazon has bought up a whole bunch of, or is really tight with Berkshire Hathaway, and they've bought up a lot of stop loss insurance companies, or not like the reinsurance component. So the guy kind of laid out this big master plan of how they're creating this ecosystem that one thing will lead to another, and you'll be able to piece it all together and potentially, they could build a product or a solution that could go to a Fortune 500 company and say, hey, we're doing this at Amazon and Berkshire Hathaway and JP Morgan. It's working great for us. We're controlling our costs. What do you think about this, General Motors? Or what do you think about that? So I think all these things are going on right now. I think from the Haven venture is underway. I think they're doing what do you call it? Like little test tube incubator things with some of the Berkshire Hathaway companies. I think that they bought PillPack, so that's obviously working. I don't know. I forget how many memberships that they had who are actually using PillPack now, but I think they didn't spend $1 billion on it for like the 40,000 people who were doing it. They spent $1 billion on it because they want to have 40 million people doing it, right? So, so I think it's one of those things where they're on the precipice of probably pretty big things. I think Amazon just, they were in the news just real recently too, maybe somebody else knows, where they were doing something disruptive around telemedicine. Either they bought a company and they were doing something. So it's all these fragmented pieces that they're going to probably pull together. They've got this fantastic brand, and I think it's gonna be just, it's exciting because as much like if you read in the news, Walmart just opened up a health center down in Georgia, where they're gonna put their prices right on the wall. Like an X-ray is $50, or a doctor visit's $20, and it's gonna be fully transparent. So these disruptive forces will put pressure on the market, right, to compete. The problem in healthcare in our country is that there's no economic reality to it, like any other thing, right? Any of the other thing you buy,
right?
You think about value, right? Cost and quality. In healthcare, we have no vision into the cost or the quality, so that's why the market totally doesn't work. Yeah. So I think these places like Walmart and Amazon, who are going to bring in economic realities, they'll be disruptors, and there'll be winners and losers. But I think in general, there'll be more winners than losers because it's the people who need to win. So kind of exciting.
Good. All right. Anybody else?
I can go on my end. So a lot of other folks, I had a hard time finding a relative article within healthcare within the States, but I did find one that was, I think, hit a little close to home with what's going on in the marketplace. It was really based on a foreign life insurance company and the impact it has on employees from what they called locus of control, changes in workload, and career prospects within the organizational commitment. And it was really born off of regulation within basically says here, it's based out of Europe, but the acquiring company was in Europe, but what happened was there was a financial reporting regulation that came out that created more stringent financial requirements if you did business in Taiwan. And for me personally, I lived this within the last 4 years. On MetLife's end, we spun off a large portion of our business to what was called Bright House Financial. And the reason for that is Dodd-Frank Act of 2010. So we used to have a group business, and then we had an individual business for life and disability. The Dodd-Frank Act basically came off of the financial crisis in 2007, and it put, born off of AIG, and the bailout from the federal government, but what it did is it created what we called systematically important financial institutions, or SIFI, and that was MetLife, Prudential, and AIG. And essentially, all three of us were going to be regulated as a bank. So what we would have to do is have extremely high capital requirements as a life insurance carrier, which Terry and Aaron, from a CFO perspective, if I have higher expenses and I have to keep higher capital, that makes us uncompetitive in the marketplace. So ultimately what we did is we sued the federal government, and that took about 4 or 5 years. We won that case, but also as the administrations changed, they did away with the Dodd-Frank Act. But since we already put that in motion, we did spin off that separate company. We sold all the individual agents to Mass Mutual, and then we completely did a full-on share buyback this year. And then we told Wall Street that we would do, over the next 5 years, we would have $1 billion in expenses and expense reduction. So all those things considered, it had a major impact within the organization. It had positive and negative impacts. It created very stringent workload balances where we didn't have headcount budgets. We didn't have people that we can hire and support. We had great career opportunities. We had great optimism because from an actual MetLife enterprise perspective, the group business became the sole growth engine of the company. And we have 10 different types of businesses, and group benefits is just one of them, but that is the leading growth engine. So with that, we got a lot of resources, we have a lot of product innovation, we have a lot of new and exciting things that are happening. But also when you're restricted in investments and you're restricted in expenses, it has a negative impact within employee morale. And then I thought about, that's just us. We didn't do any sort of merger and acquisition. All we did was just spin off a company based on financial regulations that we were anticipating to have. But then all of us, we looked together and what happens in the market. You can go down the line. The most recent one that came out was Cigna. Cigna decided that they're gonna spin off their life and disability business with their absence management. And there's rumors out there of why they're doing that. They're selling for $6 billion, but they need $6 billion right now so they can go out and buy providers, so they can keep up with their current competition within the medical space, where now they need to get tracked and go after hospitals and hospital systems. They need capital to do that. The market has forced them to make a decision to sell off a major piece of their business in order to compete, but also what does that do to their brand? What does that do to the people that are getting purchased from whoever that rumor is at Sun Life, or it could be another carrier that's going to buy that business? But what does that do to those folks that are currently employed there? And I think that makes a big difference because they have customer relationships, they have broker relationships, they have consultant relationships. That could, I think that's a weak spot. And for all of us, what we can do to impact this, I think it's a big important point. And how you impact in major corporate decisions creates opportunity, but also creates extreme vulnerability. Another one is a direct competitor of ours, of Lincoln Financial. They purchased Liberty Mutual, and reason for that was they lacked large market, basically national account type of administration and technology. But that's a 3-year implementation process, and I know that that's had stringent issues on their customer base and on the Liberty customer base. Aetna and CVS, Aetna had to sell off their disability business to Hartford. And this is all carrier based, but even from our end, carrier broker relationships, Willis. So Willis and Towers did a merger. The Towers folks are a completely different type of person than the Willis advisors were. And we felt that as a carrier. I think the customers felt that, a little bit of tug and pull of what the concepts were and what they were trying to accomplish. So I really tried to tie it to what was going on. And I found that a couple interesting pieces were locus of control, which would be internals versus externals. And people that believe, an internal person would believe that the things that happen around their environment are because of their behavior. And then on the external end is whatever happens around them is basically what impacts their future, or their ability to control the situation. And I think I experienced both of those. I experienced me personally, and I think during a merger and acquisition or some major change, you are susceptible to whatever change has happened to you, but also you control a lot of your fate or what you're going to do to pivot around that. Other really key takeaways were just what I thought to be theoretical items, where how important people within an organization are ultimately to customer relationships and to your brand. And when you shake, from a high level perspective and you make major decisions, what that can typically do from an opportunity basis and a vulnerability perspective. That's it.
That's a lot of changes. It's a lot going on there. I was involved in one merger and it was huge, so I can feel for those folks. It's a lot going on. Okay, anybody else?
I think I haven't got a mine yet. It was actually on a cross-hospital study.
Okay.
Looking at their nursing staff and clinical staff cultures and learning about new, not anything specific, but just their general change in their attitude of learning and carving it in, as far as how it comes in clinical outcomes. And so it was not so much of a industry paper on change as much as it was an actual study, scientific research study on clinical outcome change. The big takeaways for me, other than the fact I'm not clinical enough to read some of this stuff, was that it was really designed from a core leadership piece where they were involved at the high level, but really then created the area of creating those employee culture and employee values of funding the educational opportunities, sending people to conferences, sending people to classes, and really going through a 2-year process of making sure that there was a high level team that was overseeing it, but then they were empowering the people that needed to make the change. And then that actually did create that correlational change to the clinical outcomes. And it caused those that did them to adapt and move clinical protocols much faster than the ones that didn't have those kind of training, creating that culture of learning into their clinical staff. Which I kind of relate back to the idea that, medicine changes really slowly unless it's anesthesia, because people are screaming on the table and you're cutting on them. Everything else moves pretty slowly. And so that, back to anesthesia took, a couple months to change from ocean to ocean once the clinical protocol showed a better outcome, but everything else goes really, really slow. So seeing, big, huge organizations like a hospital build in that more cultural knowledge and that vision from top and having people execute on it, to seeing an actual clinical improvement of outcome in the status of health. So that was really kind of almost a cheat of an article, because scientific research studies have to be followed pretty well, and then those hospitals participating couldn't basically give up on the vision and still be part of the research. So kind of having that, almost to me, is almost like having an outside body making sure you don't give up on a project midway through. Probably had as much to do with it as making sure that there was leadership vision, so that it was the whole the current culture, the current things that are stressing an organization don't kill the overall project goal.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, sweet. I think my microphone's not been working for the past week or two here. I had a little trouble finding stuff until I found an actual study that was done by Massachusetts Gen. They have a branch that is focuses on disparities and ethnic inequalities in hospitals and organizations. And so they did a year-long executive education retreat where they had 127 different organizations attend, and it was just their executive members or people that they decided to send to it. And it was a couple weeks of intense of learning and, you know, teaching on how to fix and work with their organization to fix the disparities that they have. And they came up with 5 different steps, areas that they can work on that really kind of coincided with what we talked about 2 weeks ago with Cotter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And their 5, they called them domains, was to make sure you know who to involve. So, you know, the right people and right sections of the organization to involve and to implement the change. And I think their most important one was the culture of the organization that you're trying to change. And the third one was create an urgency or a vision, mission statement, something like that, and work together. And finally, get engagement from the environment. So don't just work within the organization. So have outside sources, outside individuals. So your community, your customers, your distributors, your suppliers, everyone works together and you get engagement from everything around you so that the change happens better. And those are their 5 things that they came up with. The study didn't give me any solid numbers, data points, because they didn't want to share it for some reason. So I only got away with the 5 domains.
Okay.
But there was, I think they said, it broke down into about 30 different subdomains of those 5. So it's a bunch of little steps to get to the big steps, but that's about it.
Okay. Did they have a lot of success, or weren't they really saying?
I think they didn't get much success. There was only a few testimonials from 4 or 5 of the members that participated. But I think they had done a good job so far from what it seems like in the writing. It's been going on for, what is it, about 10 or 11 years now. So it's a year-long program. So they're in their 10th year.
Yeah, that's a lot of history for more than most. Okay. All right. Anybody got any questions? Questions for Luke? Okay, I think we're about ready to wrap it up here then. Okay, so let's go back to. It's hard for me to tell which one of these are on the internet. Okay, so the last thing we have here is our Moodle, on Moodle, is the healthcare change implementation plan, right? That's due October 6th. I'll have the grades out for the class in about a week after that, probably. Ryan, you guys know how to drag and drop in the folder. So this is an implementation plan dealing with requirements of a successful organizational change concerning a major change in the healthcare plan of an organization. So again, this is you imagining, or in real life, right, trying to implement a healthcare change in an organization, and things you should be thinking about, the things you should be getting ready for. You know, what you think it's going to take, who you're going to have to talk to, not so much who you're going to have to talk to, but what are you going to talk about, things you need to address. We talked earlier here about managing the transformation, right? How's that going to happen? And so give us an idea of some of the things, looking at the literature, what it talks about, and you guys are experiences in the field, and kind of combining the two, and then give me some feedback on what you think needs to happen for change. And if you can develop a change plan, that gives you something to refer back to in the future. Should you be in this position, right, then you can look at what you can do. I guess, and there might be some, I'm expecting there'll be some pretty clever things in here. There's some pretty experienced people in this class, some pretty good thoughts in here. I guess if you want, I could post these in a common place where you could go read each other's. There might be some, it seems like there might be some value in you reading each other's paper. So let me say this. I'll send out an email to remind everybody, particularly those not online tonight, but at the beginning of your paper, tell me whether you want to share it with your classmates or not. If there's a reason you don't want to share it, perfectly fine. You want just me to read it. But if it's okay to share it with your classmates, then I'll dump it into like a folder on the Google Drive or something like that, where everybody can have access to it, and then you can look at each other's papers. Maybe there's things in there you can have value to. I mean, a lot of this is your job, right? So if you learn how to do it better, I think that might be helpful. So swapping war stories, learning lessons, applying the theory we've been learning in this class, I think might be helpful to some of you. So I'm gonna make that offer to the class, and if you guys want to take part in it, right, feel free to do that. So any other questions or comments for me?
Yes, Lee, this is due October 6th, which is Sunday. Is that midnight Sunday?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it says 12 a.m. Sunday.
Oh, okay. I'll go back and change that. It's supposed to be Sunday night. Yeah. In truth, right, I'm probably not going to be up at 1 a.m. grading it Sunday night. So I'm not a stickler on the time. So yeah.
Yeah, I just need to know whether you want it Saturday or Sunday, really.
Sunday. No, Sunday night's fine. Sunday night's fine. Yep. Thanks for asking. I'll go back and change. I'll change that right now, as a matter of fact. All right. Any other questions?
Lee, how much detail do you want on the current organizational structure versus
Not
how
a
we're
lot.
going to?
Don't beat it to death. Don't give me 3 pages of what's going on now, right? Just enough to bring me up to speed and then go from there. All right. Good question. Anything else?
Thank you.
Yep. Sure.
Hey, Lee, I missed the reflective narrative 2. Is that at a 0 now, or still worth writing and turning?
No,
in?
you can go ahead and send it in.
Okay, will do.
Yep, I'll take it. Yep. Any other questions? Brett, why don't you, and then email me when you send it in so I know it's there and to go grade it, all right?
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
Seems fair for being tardy.
Yeah, thanks. Anything else? I guess last comment, we were talking about convincing organizations why they should make this change. We talked a little bit about finances, and we saw the spreadsheet from Andrew and so forth. I work at a school of business professors. So if there's some type of help you might need in your organization just to make a case, or I've had a professor of finance check these numbers or whatever, right? Feel free to talk to Tom and I about that, and we can get you sometimes even if you know how to do it, sometimes it's good to add an outside name on it just to say, I've had this checked by Dr. So-and-so on it. So if you ever need help like that, feel free to let us know. And we can, if we're not the right people, we certainly sit in the hallway with the right people, and we can get you some fairly economical resources to help make your case, I guess would be my point. Okay. Anything else? I guess the last thing I want to say is I think about this class way too much. You guys scare the daylights out of me every time I walk into a drugstore or a doctor's office. I don't know if I'm going to sleep as well at night after talking to you people. It's such a mass of an issue. I mean, I'm telling you everything you already know, right? That's like, I understand why people don't want to deal with it, because it's such a big deal. It's like you're pushing on this big ball of goo and nothing's going to happen. Yet the ball of goo is going to eventually roll over the top of you. So something needs to be done, and about all you can do is start winning these little battles. Pick a battle and win it. The old saying, "How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time" thing, right? So interesting. And every time I go into a medical place, I wish to God there was a list of what charges are, what they cost. That'll be a good day. When that happens, that'll be a good day. So anyway, I guess that's it for me. Any last questions, comments, anything? Sorry about the scratchy audio tonight. I'm not sure what's going on there. No? All right. Well, I look forward to the papers. And again, I'll send out a reminder. Let me know if they're private or not, right? And then if they aren't private, I'll put them on a little Google Drive link, right, and send it out to everybody. And I think it'll be interesting reading, and you might be able to help each other a little bit with those. If you're going to do the work, right, we might as well share it. If somebody wants to share it, right, and that's fine. So no grades, of course, right, just the different papers themselves. Okay, with that, I guess I'll say good night. I'll post this out on YouTube like always. I'll have the link up on the Moodle page. And it was good to meet everybody. And I look forward to reading your papers, and we'll talk in the future.
Thank you, Lee, for everything. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Night.
Bye.